Thank you, Justin. Good afternoon. Just so I know who's here, how many, by show of hands, here is a founder? How many is a entrepreneur? Cool. That's the most important step. I was just getting some context. It's really nice to be here. I'm flew in here all the way from a different country just to moderate this panel, all the way away from this country called Canada. Some people know it, but I have these three wonderful guests with me today, and we're going to together debate a very important topic: how to build products well. I know we have a fancier title for the panel, but with that, let's start with a round of introductions. Why don't we start with Sanjeev, as you're sitting right next to me?
Sure. Hey, folks. I'm Sanjeev Banerjee. A long time, which means old, kind of engineer in the Boston startup scene, 20 plus years. Worked at Endeca for a while, worked at BitSight for a while, and delighted to learn from the two of these folks.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Jos Visser. Currently a software engineer at Amazon. Before that, I was a software engineer at Facebook and Google. And before that, I worked at very small companies as well. So I have had an opportunity to build software products in very small and in very large companies.
Jos is also an amateur pilot, flies a Cessna.
Yeah, Cessna 172.
And Ben?
Hi, I'm Ben Green. I am currently the CTO in residence at Techstars Boston. I was previously, and I'm also doing CTO advisory and consulting work. I was previously the founding CTO at Outcomes for Me, co-founder CTO at a company called Windshield that you never heard of, and have built many different products from 0 to 1 in many different spaces. So I've been building startups for way too long.
Thank you, Ben. And should probably introduce myself too. I'm Jit. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Phi Labs. We do product development for startups. It's my third startup overall. I've built 2 product companies before this. Realized product development can be really hard for first-time founders. That's why I started this one, purely out of the proceeds of my last exit. We have a booth upstairs if you want to go check us out later. Cool. Well, with that, let's open up with our first topic of discussion, which is kind of foundational. So start this one with Jos. Yes, we were debating this when we were talking, planning this session. But could you give us a little history on, why do we do sprints? Why agile? How was agile born, etc.?
Yeah. So when I went to college, way back in the days, and we had topics of software engineering and software development, we learned this thing called the software development methodology, and that was like pure waterfall. Which is, you got like phases. You think a lot, write a document, get a sign off, move to the next phase, better documents, get some sign off, move to the next phase, then you code it a bit, and then you had an acceptance test, and the customer accepted, then you were done. And that was how we built software back then. It turns out that we're spectacularly unsuccessful and spectacularly bad at all of the phases in that project. We're very bad at getting requirements. We're very bad at then defining them more in a more detailed way. Then when we code software, we're also not that great at it. Testing is also not awesome. And so we built lots of software that didn't work well or didn't meet the customer's requirements. And so over time, and you have lots of, you can look at the press, lots of examples of that. Lots of big software projects went spectacularly wrong. And as a fact, it's kind of funny that we're in law school here, because I also have a law degree. And as part of my law degree, we did a moot court. And I had to defend a case where some software vendor had spent tons of money and time building something that then didn't work. And Agile was born out of that. They said okay, let's shorten that phase from thinking about it to actually delivering something to the customer, and then iterate that, so that instead of trying to guess in one big moment, what the customer actually wants, then going away for a year, build it, and then when we have it, hope that it still matches their expectation, and that we got that expectation right. Let's build that iteratively. Is this what you want? No? Okay, let's move. Is that what you want? Okay, better. Let's do more of that. Oh, this is not what you want? Okay, let's go here then. Oh, is this how that works? Okay, well, then we can go that way. And so getting faster in delivering value to the customer, and getting better at figuring out what the customer actually wants.
Thank you. Yes. Sanjeev, when we were talking, you talked a little bit about working in an organization which had just made a huge transition going from waterfall to agile, and you learned a lot in the process. Could you shed some light on?
Yeah, certainly. Really kind of pivoting off what Yost said is that, that concept of like not delivering, of kind of it not meeting requirements, it being a disaster. I joined a company that the prior release had all those attributes. Like it didn't perform, and it was really buggy, and no one knew till late. So I joined when they had adopted Agile in the last 6 to 9 months and really embraced it. And the key things that we were looking to get out of that, and we did, was 1, iteration, and 2, transparency, and just basically knowing sooner. So in some regards, it was maybe a lower bar, like there had been this disastrous release, had to change up management, had to change the tech stack. But here they want to know, is this going to work? And we need to know sooner, just extremely pragmatic.
Well, thank you. And let's finish off with Ben. This is probably going to be my favorite follow-up question. Ben, we love hating consultants, but you were at once at an organization that had a consultant brought in to coach on Agile. I'd love to hear how that corresponds to what we just heard.
Yeah, so this was a great experience. So we were a Series A startup, raised a bunch of money, had all these big expectations. I think we were in the first quarter, so that means you're still in this grace period where you haven't failed miserably quite yet. And then we crossed that line. We got to that board meeting, and I guess we failed miserably to deliver on something. And so the result was that a consultant came in. We had an engineering team of, I think, 5 people at the time. And the consultant came in and lectured us for a whole morning on Agile methodology and process. And that was all well and good. But I asked the question, so we're doing this, why? We're talking about this, why? Because I feel like we know this stuff. And he said, oh, well, you guys missed some goals, and it's okay, but we need to improve upon it. And I asked the question, what were the goals that we missed? And that was apparently not something that we could talk about. So when you are taking an iterative approach to making your way towards an end post, a success post, a goal, if your team doesn't know where you're headed, how are you supposed to adjust, right? There is a smart way, a better way, iterative way to get to an endpoint. But if you aren't focused on that, it's not going to do you any good.
Just a quick follow-up. Whose decision was it to hire that consultant?
The CEOs, the boards, I don't even know.
Not Ben.
Oh, I was very much a peon. Yeah.
Cool. Well, great insights. Let's move on to our second question of this panel. This is kind of, again, a very foundational thing, and I think Sanjeev, it would be the perfect to take the lead on that. Could you walk us through a little bit on the core elements of what a sprint is, what Agile stands for, etc., like just like a 40,000-foot view?
Sure. I'll go to like more 2,000 foot because I'm a pretty pragmatic person. So so we have a kind of a shared understanding, Agile consists of or sprints rather, kind of 4 or 5 ceremonies. And let's use 4. You've got planning. What are the goalposts? What are we working on this fixed time frame? Your stand-ups, your daily stand-up, where you're getting visibility into what's happening. You're understanding if there are any blockers, what you need to get past them. At the end, there's the review. Like, did we hit our goals or not, right? And doing that very visibly and transparently. Then the retrospective, like what went well, what didn't do well, what learnings do we have? An engineer much smarter than me who used to work for me said, you know what it is? It's really kind of planning your work and then working your plan. Like that's what you're doing. Like remember that. And you do it iteratively. So if you kind of I apply that to my team uses 2-week sprints. That's what we're doing repeatedly. You're kind of accounting for any changes in the world outside of you, and also any changes kind of that you're discovering as you do the work. So that's my common sense 2,000-foot version.
Yes, Ben, you want to weigh in? Anything to add?
Yeah, so I must say that my favorite way to do sprints is like not to code at all. Like I wrote an article like a few months ago. It's called "No, You Don't Want an App," in which I tried to explain to people like, coding is expensive and difficult. If you can get away with not doing it, you should totally do that. But if you have to do it, then follow these best practices. And I think we heard a few of them just now. I'm not personally very hung up on the exact processes because I'm just too unstructured, but like really focusing on the short-term deliverables, and then the ability that it gives you to take a risk is, I think, what's very important. Because I think we have to get away from the fact that we think that we understand, that we know what the end product is going to look like. I think that is the whole thing. Is you're like, no, we don't quite know yet. I haven't figured everything out, but I think I know this, so let's do that. And then you have a cycle where you can go back to the customer and go like, well, is this what you wanted? And then getting that feedback and making that go into the next iteration of your cycle. That is what is important to me.
Very well said. Ben, thoughts?
For me, that's everything, right? Because if you knew really what you were building, then doing it in 2-week iterations with lots of overhead would be silly. The reason that Agile is so important and necessary is because you have no idea most of the details of what you need to do. And so you need to do it in iterations where you do something, you learn, you adjust, you react, and you go. You make a plan, you figure something out, you make a few good steps, you learn, you work that plan, then you plan the next work. If you aren't doing that, you're doing it in name only. And you won't get to where you ultimately need to go.
Going off script, what would be a project example where Agile is a terrible idea and waterfall's the way to go?
If you write software for the moon lander.
It's a good
Right,
one.
because like you're going to build the thing, you're going to shoot it out into space, and then it better work. Because like if halfway through you go like, yeah, no, we didn't see that right, it's fairly hard to update the software and experiment with that. So like it's avionics, that sort of stuff, that's where you still see a lot of waterfall. But like most of the administrative processes that I deal with, typically speaking, like Agile is fantastic.
Sanjeev, you have an example in mind?
Yeah, I'll take more of a middle road instead of like, it's not, necessarily terrible for it, but it's harder. Like my background is I'm a compiler writer. And so doing that and also writing file systems, which I've done as well, are harder to wrangle because there are these foundational decisions that you truly can't iterate on. They're really one-way doors. And so I think those are harder. They are doable, but it is challenging to get kind of that, in my experience, that deep system thinker to think that incrementally and iteratively. But maybe that's me.
No, absolute sense. Cool. So I'll start this one with Ben. Ben, we've spoken a little bit about the various parts, various ceremonies, etc. What are the most critical components in your way of doing the work?
The most critical part for me of being iterative is actually realizing that the point of being iterative is to change and adjust your direction, right? If you are simply laying out a plan for a year in advance or however long, and you're doing it in 2-week bits, you're not being iterative, you're just putting in a lot of intermediary meetings, right? The point is do something, then figure out what was successful. How has the world changed? How has your knowledge of your customer changed? How is the knowledge of the technology you're using changed? If you're not making adjustments, then you're not learning. And if you're not learning, you're not taking the path to where you ultimately want to go.
Yes, agree, disagree?
No, I think that's pretty important. I mean, a lot of projects where people do the requirements gathering phase in waterfall mode and then the development in 6-week sprints. And that is exactly, I think, the error that you're pointing out, because yes, then you building the thing in 6-week increments or 4-week increments, but you're already made your mind up about what you're going to build, and you can basically try and plan your sprints like a half a year ahead. And I think that is a total failure mode, because like for me, the core of Agile is it's not only a way to organize your development, but it's also the way to organize your requirements gathering. And again, it's all based on the fact that we've built many projects over time, where when you rocked up at the customer, it goes like, well, but that's not what I wanted. And they could have told you that in the beginning of the process if you'd organized the whole thing differently. Like, and then you can just throw that software away.
Yep. Cool. So next, let's come to Sanjeev. So we talked about the various ceremonies, but when we were planning this, we had a very good discussion about there are the ceremonies, then there's things that ceremonies don't cover. That doesn't mean we can ignore them or neglect them. Like we can't just say this is Agile because we checked all the boxes that this is Agile. We have to, at the end of the day, it's a product that's being developed. Do you want to
Yeah, sure.
elaborate on that?
I guess the way I think about it is like Agile won't save you, if you will. You don't blindly adopt and have ceremonies and meetings and like everything's fine. So I think there's I think it can give you a structure, but you still have to do preparation. So like I'm seeing this with some young teams that I've worked with and run, which is like there's no substitute for like doing the right technical design. You've got to make choices about things like your tech stack, your approaches, your algorithms, all those different pieces. That's one. There's also interacting with folks just outside of your team. Even if you're cross-functional and you've got quality and product, well, you've got stakeholders too. So, and those may not neatly fall into ceremonies. They may or may not, but you've got to get their input and do it kind of incrementally. So getting that buy-in, I think, is pretty massive. And then as well is like know what defines success and be really crisp about that. Don't just be really dry, like we got our stories done. Why does that matter? So really hammering on what success looks like. So.
That's and kind of ties into the next question, which I think I should go to Jos first. Jos, what would you say in your experience of the various like hundreds of projects you're on? What's the biggest pitfalls? Or what's the most common mistake people make?
Yeah, I think I alluded to this already, like doing the requirements gathering in waterfall and doing the actual development in sprint. I think that's a very big mistake. A very small mistake, something that I passionately believe in, is starting your sprints on Monday and ending them on Friday. I'm more like a Wednesday to Tuesday kind of guy. Because like at the end of the week, there's all sorts of bad things happening typically. Right. And so if you start on a Wednesday, get started, there's a weekend, and it also gives you at the end of the sprint, gives you a bit more leeway basically. All right. So that's a very simple something you can do that people often forget. Also for on-call handovers, I'm exactly the same reason. I'm a big fan of like on-call handover on Wednesday instead of on Monday, because it breaks the week. There's lots of holidays on Monday. It just gives all sorts of problems.
Yeah, I've seen lots of teams that lay almost no important, like have very little time to do like a proper retrospective and just move on to the next one. Is that why? Like, do you want a Wednesday to Tuesday? Because like if you're retrospect, like you want to give it its due time.
If you want to give it its due time, it's also I'm of the opinion that you should never put anything in production on Friday. So if your sprint ends on a Friday, then you'll end up putting your stuff in production on a Friday. That's always a bad idea. It's way better to then wait till Monday or Tuesday. And if you're on the Wednesday, even if it runs over a bit, you still have some time. We've gone to a world where we basically run from peak to peak, and there's never any downtime anymore. Like, and with lack of downtime comes also a lack of reflection, and that's where the retrospective comes back in. Because if you do it right, not all your sprints will be successful, because sometimes you're too ambitious, sometimes you just made a mistake, or sometimes you actually run into a technical problem that you can't solve within the scope of the sprint. That's all just fine. That's why we do sprints, so that you find these things early rather than late. And then if you do this sort of Wednesday to Monday, or so Wednesday to Tuesday cycle, it gives you a little bit of time to like, okay, let's take these 2 days to sort of like think about this a bit, the weekend to decompress, and then on Monday we're coming and we go full speed again.
Makes total sense. Ben, you want to weigh on this? Biggest mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Sanjeev and Yos about the biggest mistakes, but there's some stupid mistakes that I feel like should be highlighted and that everyone should know. One of them is having more than one top priority for your team. If you have a team and they're working on different things, which is normal, you need to know what you're going to do when someone who's working on something really important is struggling. Are they going to struggle? Are they going to fail? Or are you going to pull somebody off? You need to have some flexibility within the sprint to understand that what matters more. I've also seen some really silliness around trying to be rah-rah about sprint 146. I actually really hate calling them sprints, honestly. I think it's completely wrong. I think they should be called iterations. We can get into that maybe. But you're not going to excite your team about sprint 146. That is a number, and it's frankly too big of a number, right? You need to motivate people around mission, around purpose, around what it is they're trying to build. Like, we're working towards the launch of this awesome thing, not, yay, 146, 145 was great. That's ridiculous. I had one other dumb one, but it.
Yeah, so for that last reason, like at Amazon, at least in the world that I'm in, we give our sprints names.
Yeah, find a new mission, right?
No,
Like,
no,
you've got
no.
a
So
purpose.
we take pet names. So when I joined the team, it was like, oh, do you have cats? Oh, do you have pets? I'm like, yeah, 2 Moxie and Zoe. I said, oh, we already have an M, but we'll use Zoe for Sprint Z, which is in December. And that then you have like a picture and like just a little.
It can only be so many cats.
No. My Instagram shows that there's more cats than sprints in the world. So, no, but it's also a way to sort of loosen up the atmosphere a bit. Like
The other real, both large and stupid mistake is freaking out when a sprint gets missed. This is very amorphous work. You're trying to estimate it, but at the end of the day, you don't know how long it's going to take, and you need to be able to roll with that. You need to be able to get the people around you to roll with that. If you are making every single sprint, you're really not being very ambitious, are you? Right? Like, you're clearly not pushing the boundary on what your team is capable of. So allowing outside influence to put a sort of sales quota mentality into engineering when it comes to iterations and the work that gets done is a killer in a lot of senses.
If I jump in for
Yeah,
a second,
of
like
course.
one, I love the idea of the midweek. And I think I'm going to see if I can try that. Number 1, 2, and Ben, your point about the know what your top priorities up front, it really resonates, especially on when you're looking at feature sets. My analogy is like, there's the MVP, but what's the real MVP? What are you really willing to forego? Which is I try to push product people on that. There's a line, you're not revealing it. And the third thing you mentioned about the essentially it's okay to fail a little bit or to struggle. I totally agree, but I think that's also challenging when you're trying to build discipline in your team as well. And your team may not be uniform in their skill set, their own engineering practices, et cetera. Everyone's on their professional journey. And trying to do that, I think, is kind of intrinsically challenging. Like, for me as a manager, leader of, instilling greater discipline and making it kind of a system that just works. At the same time, letting people know, like, hey, it's not high stakes. Like, it's okay to
It's a
miss.
very difficult balance because when a team misses a sprint, it is at the same time not a crisis, but something that needs to be responded to, right? Whenever you make a mistake as a team in engineering, whatever it is, you should take that in, you should make an adjustment, you should learn from it. But engineering is different than a lot of other divisions of a company in that it doesn't run well on adrenaline and cortisol. It does not run well on pressure and stress. The reason, and this happens all the time, particularly in startups when you have inexperienced management teams, inexperienced executives, where they will want to push the whole company to run on adrenaline and push, longer hours, less sleep, no days off, rah. The problem is engineering work is creative. It requires the creative centers of your brain, and cortisol, one of the hormones created by stress, turns that center off. It's not sales where you can be powered from alertness and energy, right? Adrenaline driven. That's not engineering. Some folks who are outside of engineering think that it's more of a manufacturing process and just work harder, but it's not. You have unbounded search problems left, right, and center when you're engineering, and you need to be able to think creatively to get that done. So one of the challenges is creating that buffer, that environment where you can both respond to the pressure from the outside, but also create sort of a safe space where you know that you're going to make mistakes and you're going to have failures and you're going to reach for them the next time.
And I'd like to add to that because you make a very good point. Like stress makes stupid. I'd like to say, like, some of the worst code I wrote was when I was stressed and running against a deadline. And then like weeks later, a buddy of mine came around again, like, hey, I was looking at the paging module. Like, did you write that? You're like, yes. He goes, like, it's the worst code I've ever seen. I got like, you're absolutely right. It's absolutely dumb. I mean, it works. That's the only good thing that can be said about it. But you've created a problem then. And engineering is weird. And I completely get it that non-engineers don't get that. But for many people, it's like if you're coding, taking some time away from your desk and walking around is often more productive than just sitting there and trying to make it happen.
I have a great story that
Yeah.
aligns perfectly with that. So we were launching a free online textbook company. And because it was aligned with for university students. So because it was aligned with the college schedule, we couldn't release next week. We had to release on the day that classes were coming up because we wanted to be the alternative to textbooks. It was myself and another engineer. We were 6 people total. So 2 of us doing most of the engineering. We spent 100 hours scheduled in that last week developing every feature we wanted to launch with. We obviously did not get through the whole list because otherwise we would have slept. But on that list were all sorts of really cool features. We got a whole bunch of them done, and we stayed up all night long and got lots of dumplings from Chinatown, had a great old time. But we didn't build everything, getting everything crossed off the list. We went back home, showered, came in, and everyone's in a foul mood, and we don't know why. And I asked, and it's because we were having terrible conversion on all the ad spend. Turns out that on that list, below on the line, make text highlighting work and send nice automatic emails after a couple days. Below that was validate that the sign-up form works in all browsers. That was lower on the list, and no one was looking through the whole list. They were working through the list and working on the cooler engineering features and having a grand old time and pumping music. But we didn't do that. And as a result, about 60, 70% of the people that we paid to get to the website couldn't see the placeholder labels, back in the day, placeholder labels for the web form to sign up. They were coming to a page that had blank inputs, shrugging and leaving.
It's a very good story. I've been there, done that. Cool. All right, we're exactly at the halfway point right now. Let's pause for a second and see if there's, we've had quite a few discussions. Let's see if there's any questions from the audience. Anybody wants to? Levy. Here comes the mic.
So a lot of what you've been talking about seems like geared towards bigger organizations. In my company, we basically have, it's a small organization, it's a small tech team, and having like formal sprints is a lot more challenging. So how would you?
How big?
How big?
Yeah.
Well, we have like 2 developers.
And why is it challenging? Because you can.
Well, in other words, because you have retrospectives and the whole thing. We do write user stories, and proper user stories, etc. So we're not doing any kind of waterfall stuff. But what would you suggest? How to take if you got a team which has, and they're not all full time. So you have we have a DevOps guy, and then you have somebody else, and they're all pulled in.
I completely get it. Let me. So retrospective. How do you do retrospective?
Well, I'm not asking about retrospective. I'm saying
No, but like take an example, because you say like you have all these ceremonies like retrospectives and stories, and like how do you do them? And I go like, well, find low key ways to do them. So for the retrospective, it's like, hey, here's how we do retrospectives. Wednesday morning, we go to the Starbucks for coffee and we talk for half an hour about what happened last week. That's your retrospective. I don't need a doc. I don't need a correction of errors. I don't need action items. I don't need lessons learned. If you have 2 developers and they just drink coffee and they talk about it, that's your retrospective. But take the time and make it a culture to do that. And that can be super efficient that way, because they're going to go for coffee anyway. You use that time. That's one example.
Yeah, I was going to say that I just reject your premise entirely.
Yeah, me too.
It's so
actually,
much
yeah.
easier at your size,
Exactly.
right? What you have 2 developers, you have yourself, right? Like you've got 3 people in the room to figure this stuff out. It takes like 10, 15 minutes. Maybe you have a 30-minute discussion like once every couple months because something's unclear and there's actually a difference of opinion. This is an approach for discipline, right? And maybe it's not about having. I mean, so yes, the area where I think you are touching on is completely correct. Is you have to build the process that fits your team, right? You're not going to do some of the larger, more drawn out, more ceremonial stuff if you're 3 people. That's kind of impractical. But the principles of Agile, and like, let's just throw Scrum and like all of the cards and the training sessions out the window for like, let's just talk about like simple principles. Like you plan a certain amount of work, you try and do that work, you review how it went, you learn from it, you plan new work, and you do that. That's just discipline. And it's important discipline. And you can do it however you want. I'm really not religious about how, but having those key ideas that you're adjusting and that you're being disciplined about what you do. And yeah, every time, every team hits a point where they realize that we got something much more important to do and we have to change it mid-iteration. That's fine. But learn from it.
And if I can add to that, a lot of what we see in Agile is, I think, a lot of bureaucracy is implemented incorrectly, nevertheless used, and then completely ignored. Like, so I was in this team where I joined a company and they used Jira, and I was finding a bug, and I couldn't press submit because I had to enter story points. So I go like, okay, folks, what's the story point here? And they were like, well, we don't know. And they go, but I need to enter it. What do I enter? No, I just enter something. So I entered 42, press submit. Got that. So now that you've created a hurdle, which is ideally speaking, would probably go into some process and people look at it, but apparently no one looks at it. The hurdle's still there. And so, yeah, maybe you've implemented a bunch of agile bureaucracy, but so don't do that. That's all just BS.
Can I just add to what like Ben said is be agile about agile. The whole point is literally being agile and nimble. Do not be dogmatic. I would start with like, hey, how about we'd have a planning? So we just figure out what we're going to work on. Can we do that? Cool. Let's check it in 2 weeks and see how did we do it. Do that. That should be dead simple. That's not a retro. It's not a stand-up. And then you can layer in other things. We did this at Endeca where we did sprints for a few years because we had to save the team. And we saved the team, but it ground people down. So some started doing Kanban, some started doing Scrumban. The point being like we adapted it, right? And we started changing this like non-trivially. So do that. Pick what works and then layer on top of it.
Hey, that's a perfect segue to my next question, Sanjeev. In your years at small companies, medium-sized companies, can you think of like one or two small changes that can make a huge difference, like low-hanging fruits kind of deal?
Low-hanging fruit things. I'd say like relative probably to Ben, Yas, I've probably been in like more mid-stage, like typically a series B or C and you're growing. And this is maybe less about agile per se, but it's where you've got to start doing a little bit of divide and conquer, where it's not everyone in the room, in the meeting, everyone, where it becomes the more evident that it's not as much of a democracy. But basically being able to divide and conquer, and maybe have sub teams, et cetera. Maybe have fewer voices in some of the decision-making ceremony. So I think it's less about agile, but it's related to it because you'll see the folks in these conversations, et cetera. It's a subset. So that's one thing that comes to mind. I don't think it's very illuminating, but it comes to mind.
Yeah, Ben, especially because like with your Techstars folks, you probably see the opposite end of the spectrum, like one person, two people teams, right? What would you say is most relevant there?
I was actually thinking a little bit later, like closer to half dozen to a dozen. Let me think about that. But I think one of the best things you can do is get other engineers to talk at your sprint kickoff. It's very easy if you're the person running engineering, responsible for engineering, to be the one who speaks to engineering and for engineering all the time. And generally, you're doing sprint kickoff for your teammates from other departments for the whole company, whatever. If you are the only one ever speaking, you're really not creating the intraperson communication that you need to succeed and have people work together to go in search of goals and accomplish goals. In terms of really, really, really small teams, just be okay not being able to do everything right away. Like, you're one person.
Let's pose it in a different way. They don't have to be really small teams, but like especially if you like, I'm a mentor for Techstars too, and like see a lot of companies. A lot of them are not full time, and that's when agile gets really hard. Anything they can do about it? Because I bet a lot of the founders, entrepreneur, the sole entrepreneur we have in the room did start off with something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, I like even really, really early, 1-2 people. I like having a system that I can use to track stories and story points, as amorphous as they are, and velocity. Because the earlier you invest in that, in a tool like that, I really like Pivotal Tracker, which has been around for a long time, hasn't changed much. But it helps you get a sense of like what can you on average accomplish, and you can really get a clean sense over time, like faster than you'd think, of how your team works. And for part-timers, you can actually set velocities and adjust when people go up and down in time, which is kind of nice. But having, you're going to very quickly amass a laundry list, a huge list of things that you need to do, things you might want to do, things you could do. And you do need a good system for tracking all that.
Could I jump in for a second? I thought
Yeah.
of something that Ben's
Yes, of course.
comments spurred me to think a little more deeply about. I'd say like at the medium stage, when you medium stage is scale up stage. You've got something that's working, you're going to add more people. So I think it is critical then that you do things that you can scale the behavior you want. So your practices, you've got to have other people doing these practices in the ways that you want them to do. It doesn't have to be super prescriptive, but you want the same kind of outcomes and the same rhythms across these different teams. So that means like if you're head of engineering or you're a director and you oversee multiple teams, you've got to not just empower, but have the right expectation of those running these different, whether it's sprints, Kanban, whatever you're doing, in ways that can truly scale out. Because that's typically where the company is at that stage. You can still be creative, but you need to be able to stamp out building blocks in a way that is repeatable and has some degree of consistency.
Great point. Yas, you already gave a great one. And on a Tuesday, not a Friday. Anything else comes to mind?
Yeah, no, in general, and this is actually further to what you guys just said, and to your question about. So most of my experience is with small teams in large companies, and that comes with different sort of challenges. But what I notice that even if you do sprints and you do agile, over time velocity goes down, and trying to keep the velocity up is one of the most important things I think for any development organization, where it's like two part-timers or like a 6-person team, or like, as we call it at Amazon, a 2-pizza team. And there's just and velocity is death by 1,000 cuts. Like there's all these things that grind you down, but very important in both small and larger teams and in small and larger organizations is to make sure that your people have the ability to focus and to do work uninterruptedly. And I think in small company where there's lots of stuff happening, there's lots of interruptions, this can be very hard. But software engineering really benefits from the ability to work at something for 4 hours or 6 hours at a time. And the moment you have to switch out for a meeting and come back, or take a phone call and come back, or like get pulled into like some escalation or come back, that really slows you down tremendously. And be on the lookout for these sort of hidden friction that comes into your organization and into your team, because then your sprint becomes a crawl. And you crawl from one sort of like stage to the next one.
Very good point.
It's such an important point. Protect your engineers' time. Get them large chunks of uninterrupted time. That's the only time the work's going to get done.
Yeah, even at Facebook, we did no meeting Wednesdays, and it worked surprisingly well. Like the managers and the senior TL still have meetings, but for most other people, there was a day that they could get like a lot of stuff done.
And to be clear, engineers should go to meetings. Engineers need to be connected to other people in other departments and do things and be communicating and understand the customer and understand the internal stakeholders. But they also need have the meetings in the morning when the engineers are still waking up. Give them 1 to 5 completely meeting free. Let them focus. They will enjoy it, right? Again, this is creative work. They need to get in their headspace. It takes me at least an hour when I'm coding to get really fully into the problem where I feel like I'm being productive. The thing that will keep your velocity up long-term is the positive internal motivation that you can build in your culture of your engineering team and of your organization, right? Ultimately, what keeps that drive going is liking what they're doing, feeling it has purpose, feeling that they're making progress. And you need to make sure that they can feel that and that they're empowered to have that. Otherwise, creative work will be exhausting, they'll burn out, and it will be death by 1,000 cuts.
Perfect time to bring in, slightly off script, remote versus in-person. Agile was developed for high frequency interactions. How have you seen that evolve into a somewhat remote world today?
I can go first. So my company, my previous company, we went remote in March 2020. We were an in-person team. We all worked in the same very small room. There were 4 or 5 of us at the time, and we had to both go remote, and I also hired, I think, 3 new engineers in the span of 2 months. And so we had to onboard most of our team size again and try and recreate the culture that we had built internally with those other new folks. And it was hard. It was really hard because we were so used to just looking over and just talking, right, to the person next to you and joking and throwing stuff up on the whiteboard. And all of a sudden we had this huge barrier. The biggest thing that remote created that I noticed was just a higher threshold of when someone will reach out and talk to you, right? And a lot of what I did managing our team was try and push that threshold down, try and encourage people to ask questions in public, to communicate when they needed to. So what we used Slack. One of the things I did was I created we had an ends channel, but people would only post things that they felt were important enough. So then I created an ends help channel. And just to say, look, this exists because you need help and you should ask all your questions here. And then people would ask me questions because they would always come to me eventually. And I'd say, ask it there and I'll answer it there. Because in a room, when you create a culture and you see that other people are asking each other questions, you say, oh, it's okay for me to ask questions. But on Slack, if everyone's DMing everyone else, you don't know that they're asking questions. You don't know that that's okay and encouraged. So making some of those things public, trying to lower the barrier for people to ask questions to get unblocked was a really critical investment in sort of cultural adjustment that we had to make when we went remote.
Just
Absolutely.
segueing off that, I
Yeah.
think that notion is, I can't hammer it enough, is that use public channels, use channels rather. Public or private, you can decide. I have an eng-only channel because everyone wants to bug my engineers. I need others to understand. You can actually look at the browser and click and you can figure this out. Do not bug my engineers, please. But when I get DM'd or when people are DMing for technical questions, like, hey, can you please use Slack's forwarding feature, because you can go public to private now, right? And let's share more broadly. But the higher point I'd make around doing it remotely is what I've found to work directionally is be very intentional about communication. Like you have to put thought into it, because you need that flow time. Like that's where engineers thrive. It's hard to create. But we've become like super intentional about communication and also docking things. That's pretty obvious, but dock things. And then when someone joins the team, I'll check it in 2 weeks. I'm like, hey, can we review the docs? I'm like, do we actually follow this? Or I just feel good about it in a vacuum and no one else, we just kind of do what we want to do. So a few tactical things that I found to kind of help foster, that we all are kind of reading from the same page.
Yeah, no, I can add to that. And the communication one is an interesting one. Like if you have a large enough team, one good way to deal with interruptions is to have a rotating schedule of someone who can be interrupted, like an on-call, for instance, who is then also responsible for answering the people bugging engineers on the engineering channel, like make sure that, and because that takes away the pressure from other people to look at it. So there's also an organizational feature. But for me, hybrid is really the way to go, because I like working from home because it gives me focus time and flow. And I like being in the office because then I actually get to talk to people. One of the things that I found about working remotely is it's very hard to deal with underperformers while dealing remotely. And it's very hard to develop people into senior people while working remotely, because you just don't have enough face time. They don't learn by osmosis. The whole team doesn't learn by osmosis. But for focus time, it was, and for people who knew what they were doing, it worked brilliantly. So now we need to figure out how that goes.
Yeah, I finally made the call with the hard decision to have everybody back in the office 3 days a week starting 1st October. My people are not happy. Well, some people are not happy.
No, Amazon did the same, and people are like publicly not happy about it. But as I tell people, we're a multi-billion-dollar company, not an organic hippie farm.
It's like people we hired in January that have seen once.
Yeah.
Gets to a point where like you're doing the job you're assigned, but that's pretty much it. You're not going.
Yeah.
Hey, sorry, Sanjeev, I think you wanted to add something.
Oh,
Right?
yeah, just to be maybe controversial, I disagree with Justin in one point, because I've actually had to do this, is about underperformers. It has forced me personally to sharpen how I think about performance, actually, where I also incorporate, and I'm transparent about metrics as a first-class citizen. Like I look in GitHub, I look at details in GitHub, I look at Jira, and I share that with folks. Like, hey, I'm going to look here. And it's not to judge you. Okay, maybe it's a little bit to judge you, but it's to understand. It's to make you better, et cetera. So it's actually been a pretty strong catalyst for me personally and for others I work with to kind of go, I'm not sure why this person isn't here anymore. Like, oh, okay, well, I try to use metrics as part of my assessment, right? When I think how someone's doing. Here's an example.
Right. But how do you, Sanjeev, going back, this was supposed to be the last question on the list. I'm just going to jump over there because it's like the perfect segue. How do you define the success so it's like visible to everybody?
You mean of individual people or of the sprint or
Both.
Yeah, well,
They're related, right?
Well, I'll take the sprint. I always think like, Agile's not going to save you in that. If you simply you've planned, you've set some marks, go on, and at the end you go like, oh yeah, we completed these stories, ergo we must have done what we did. You've got to really define success in 2 dimensions, one for your team and for the stakeholders. And you do that up front. And the stakeholders, like their opinion, you do not substitute your opinion for theirs. And ideally that's something that is shipped that they can look at, or depending on how you release, maybe it's something you demo. Again, that's all very kind of company specific. But I think that definition of success, define it early and make sure that you've got the stakeholders' view as a first-class citizen.
Excellent point. Ben, you had a really good point about the correlation between effort and results. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, don't confuse them. Don't confuse effort with results. You can have your team be building lots of things, knocking off story points, crushing sprints, iterations, what do you want to call them? If you're not actually making business progress, then you're failing, right? You don't get to just stick your head in the sand and say, oh, we did our stories. No, don't confuse effort with results. You're part of the team. You're part of the business. Yes, you have a complex world with acronyms that nobody else understands. That's just your role. But you are there to help build a business. And just piggybacking on Sanjeev, ultimately, the success of engineering is whether engineering helps the organization to accomplish its business goals. And it's a team sport. There are members on the team who contribute to a whole. You can tell when people aren't really up to snuff and aren't contributing to the team, and you can sack them or you can train them or whatever. But you are there to do something, not just get things accomplished. We're not digging holes.
Yeah, no, I think that I fully support that, and you need to define upfront what that means. Like Amazon is well known for working backwards from the customer, so we say upfront, like this is what we want to achieve, this is the impact that we want to realize. Now, what are we going to do to make that happen? So you have service level objectives, you have agreements, you have impact statements that you want to reach, and you work towards them. And you continuously need to track them if you're getting there. And then because velocity is a direction, you can run around in circles really fast. And that is I would say a danger of Agile, is that you have your 6-week sprint, you deliver something, and people go like, well, that's not quite what I wanted. And then in your next sprint, you go and fine tune that. And they go like, well, it's still not quite what I wanted. And then you go and fine tune that. And pretty soon you're in the area of diminishing returns. Instead of saying like, no, hang on. We have other things that we also need to do. This is good enough for now. Let's work on these other goals. So make sure that you keep the end goal in mind while you sort of progress through these sprints. Because otherwise you get, like I said, you're in the area of diminishing returns on a very small topic of your overall deliverable that you will then never reach. And even though you've been very busy, like every week. So that's, again, it's effort versus results. But define what the results will be that you're going for.
And this opens up a whole can of worms for like HR and things like that. But like in the interest of time, so let's go on to our last question for the day before we open up for the second time for audiences. So as followers, like as when you run a team with Agile, you're kind of like, depending on what company you're in, you're still kind of an organizational minority. You're working with sales, business development, marketing, operations who have deadlines, they have targets. How do you interface with them? Who wants to go first? I feel like, Yas, you have your hand on the mic.
Yeah, I'd rather not talk to people in general. But how do you interface with them? I mean, there's a huge, I really feel for the stakeholders that I'm working with currently inside Amazon, but before that in the other companies I worked in, because I completely get why they don't get why software engineering is such a hassle, right? Because they go like, how hard can it be? I want a web page with a few buttons. Like, how hard can that be? And it's like, well, but there's like zones and, relational and S3 and buckets and IAM, and it's hard. And you've lost them within seconds. The only question I asked them is like, okay, what is actually your problem? What do you have to be done by when and why? Okay, that is the only thing I really want to know. And then I start questioning that, because otherwise they'll over ask me. And then work towards that. I mean, that is really the only trick. But there needs to be someone who keeps track of that. Like, what does the customer actually want, and have the ability to talk to them. Like, and I regularly, I'm a true engineer, but I am also communicative, and I regularly get a compliment from people that go like, "Oh wow, this is the first time that I've spoken to an engineer in this project who doesn't immediately sort of bamboozle me with tech talk in like 5 seconds," because I get it why they don't get it.
Sanjeev?
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of a couple of things you just said. One is about the folks just don't understand why it takes so long. And I face that at my current company. I work at a company called Waymark Care. We're in the Medicaid space. And folks they just honestly wonder, like, why does it take so long? So one thing that I did, and I've done this at other companies, is give a presentation. It's a bit of a use case. Hey, here's how we build it, and here's all the pieces. It's not simply I write some code and I ship it. You do it in a very empathetic way, not in a lectury way, but map it to kind of like, here's what the day looks like for us. Because most people understand how they spend their day. That helped tremendously, just build understanding, patience. That part is critical. And two, I think part of your question was interfacing with the outside world, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Having a good product organization as your partner is critical. Like, engineering is a team sport. Product development is a team sport. It does not have to be you alone. In fact, there's an expression that a CEO once told me about, like, if you try to win alone, you're going to lose alone. So, win as a team, right? I happen to have a very good product partner, and we do these things together, and that helps our outcomes to be better and much more consistent as well.
Ed, got 60 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, Yoss and Sanjeev's answers were terrific. The only thing I would also highlight is that you're going to have to work with other departments who are trying to figure out how to move their parts of the business forward as well. And you're going to have to take some sacrifice to do that. A lot of engineering is always focused on being hyper efficient. Sometimes you have to sacrifice some efficiency to help your teammates in other departments.
Cool.
Yeah, and just one anecdote about people not getting what you do as an engineer. Like, I came home one day and my wife asked, "Hey honey, how was your day?" It's like, "Well, I spent the whole day looking at literally one page of code that contained a bug. And after looking at it for 6 hours, I swapped 2 lines and then it worked." And she was like, "Why didn't you swap these 2 lines at the start of the day?" And like, "Well, because it took me 6 hours, because of multi-threaded concurrency, waffle. And I go like, "Because it took me 6 hours to figure out which 2 lines and why they had to be changed." And then I go like, "Yeah, I get this. I get that no one gets this."
I'm totally going to steal that story.
Yeah, because we all have that story. Yeah.
All right, folks, we have come to the point where you get another opportunity to ask questions. As you know, like, as engineers, we're a talkative bunch. We don't get out much from our boxes, so when they let us out once in a while, we just can't shut up.
See the light today.
Any questions at all?
Yep. Microphone.
In the microphone, please. Thank you.
I apologize for being a little late. I had a class, but I just wanted to ask you guys, like, what are your what is the best way you guys have gone about rallying investment around your startups, and like, what is the most effective channels you guys have used in like different events, whether it be like Mass Challenge, going to the Cambridge Innovation Center, Startup Week, and just finding cool people, and it's all about who that can help you, in the startup world. And if you guys could enlighten me on,
That would be also a great question for the next panel I'm going to do upstairs in about 15 minutes, but please go ahead.
Because you have to go to
Nice
the next
plug.
panel too. No, we'll
All right, well,
do
thank
it iteratively.
Sure. I'd say that have an authentic message, know what that is, and sell the purpose of what you're doing. Sounds kind of simple. Maybe it's ineffective. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm a VP of engineering. I'm not an entrepreneur. But I think people are drawn to purpose, and they're drawn to kind of like, if you know what you are, and that way people can opt in or not. Don't try to please everybody with some pitch of, I'm doing AI and I'm doing ads and I'm doing prop tech as well. No, you're doing one thing, talk about that one thing, and let your passion come through.
Yeah. I'm not a great person to talk about it because I'm terrible at that kind of stuff. But I think that the the quality of your message is super important. Like, and if you can explain why other people will give you money for your product, people will listen to that. And I've got a friend of mine who always says, like, if you have a battery that is twice as effective as any other battery out there, you don't need a marketing department. Yeah, maybe because I've got a battery. What does it do? It's twice as good as any other battery. Let's talk. I mean, everyone wants that battery.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just work. Just work. Talk to people. Experiment. You don't need to be really complicated in what you do. You just need to learn, and you learn and learn and learn and learn and talk and talk and talk and talk, and sooner or later you will have gotten somewhere.
Thank you guys. I appreciate you.
And what the topic of the next panel, it's literally called Show Me the Money. And that's what I tell people too, is you have to show potential investors how they're going to make money out of it. If they get that and it's simple enough that they understand, you're good. I think we have time for about half a question. So a very short one.
Who wants a really short answer?
Yes and
No,
no's only.
yes, no answer.
Well, I think that's a wrap. Oh, did we cover?
No, I think we're there. No, that's it.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming, and everybody who's joining in virtually. Thank you. I'm waving at the camera. I don't know if it's looking at me or not.